Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through endless YouTube videos, desperately searching for something that will finally help your brain shut off and drift into peaceful sleep. But here's the thing. What if I told you that one of the most chaotic, irreverent animated shows on television actually contains some of the most intricate, soothing lore that's perfect for bedtime listening? Tonight, we're diving deep into the surprisingly complex world of Family Guy, exploring the hidden depths, character backstories, and interconnected mysteries that will gently carry you off to dreamland. You might be wondering how a show known for its cutaway gags and crude humor could possibly be relaxing. But trust me, when you peel back the layers of chaos and focus on the underlying mythology, Family Guy reveals itself to be a masterpiece of world building that's been quietly developing for over 2 decades. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that you've never experienced before. Let's start with the Griffin family home itself, that iconic house at 31 Spooner Street. This isn't just any ordinary suburban dwelling. There is a character in its own right, with a history that stretches back generations. The house has witnessed countless adventures, housed multiple families, and even survived being completely destroyed and rebuilt. There's something deeply comforting about the consistency of this space. The way the living room layout never changes, how the kitchen remains a constant gathering place for the family's most important moments. The basement of the Griffin house holds particular significance in the show's lore. It's not just where Peter keeps his exercise equipment that he never uses. It's been a fallout shelter, a laboratory, a secret hideout, and even a portal to other dimensions in various episodes. The basement represents the hidden depths beneath the surface chaos of the Griffin family life, much like how this very video represents the hidden depths beneath Family Guy's surface comedy. Speaking of Peter Griffin, let's explore the surprisingly complex psychology of this seemingly simple character. Peter isn't just a bumbling father figure. He's a man with deep-seated insecurities, childhood trauma, and an almost childlike wonder about the world around him. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, shaped his entire worldview. Growing up believing his father was dead, only to discover he was actually alive and working as a knight at medieval times, created a fundamental trust issue that manifests in Peter's often erratic behavior. Peter's various career changes throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they represent his constant search for identity and purpose. From his time as a toy factory worker, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief period as a country music star, to his role as a brewery owner. Each job represents a different facet of Peter's personality trying to emerge. The fact that he always returns to the brewery suggests that, deep down, Peter understands that consistency and routine are what truly matter in life. The relationship between Peter and his wife Lois is built on a foundation that runs much deeper than surface-level attraction. Lois Pewterschmidt Griffin comes from incredible wealth and privilege, yet she chose to marry a blue-collar worker and embrace a middle-class lifestyle. This decision speaks to her character's core values. She prioritizes love, family, and authenticity over material comfort. Her occasional moments of frustration with Peter aren't signs of a failing marriage, but rather natural responses to the challenges of loving someone unconditionally. Lois's musical talents, her piano playing and singing abilities, represent her artistic soul that she's never fully abandoned despite becoming a full-time mother and wife. These moments when she plays piano in the living room are some of the show's most genuinely peaceful scenes, offering viewers a glimpse into the quieter, more contemplative side of the Griffin household. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of human development and potential. Meg, often the target of the family's jokes, is actually the most grounded and emotionally mature member of the household. Her struggles with popularity and self-acceptance mirror the universal teenage experience, but her resilience and ultimate self-worth make her a quietly heroic figure. The way she continues to care for her family despite their treatment of her speaks to an inner strength that's truly admirable. Chris Griffin embodies the awkward transition from childhood to adulthood, with all the confusion and wonder that entails. His artistic talents, his surprising moments of wisdom, and his generally kind nature suggest a bright future ahead. Despite his current social awkwardness, there's something deeply relatable about Chris's journey of self-discovery. His struggles with body image, and his earnest attempts to understand the adult world around him. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. Behind his megalomaniacal exterior lies a sophisticated intelligence grappling with existential questions that most adults never even consider. Stewie's time machine adventures aren't just science fiction comedy, they represent humanity's eternal desire to understand our place in the universe, to correct our mistakes, and to glimpse what lies ahead. The evolution of Stewie's character from would-be world conqueror to confused child genius to questioning young person represents one of television's most subtle and well-executed character developments. His relationship with Brian the dog serves as the emotional core of many episodes, showing how friendship can transcend species, age, and even sanity. Brian Griffin deserves special attention in any discussion of Family Guy lore. As the family dog who walks upright, speaks eloquently, and pursues intellectual interests, Brian represents the aspirational aspects of human nature. His struggles with alcoholism, his romantic failures, and his literary ambitions make him perhaps the most human character on the show, despite being a dog. Brian's backstory, including his time as a stray in Austin, Texas, and his eventual adoption by the Griffin family, speaks to themes of belonging and found family that resonate deeply with viewers. His college education, his liberal political views, and his artistic pretensions might make him seem pretentious, but they also represent the very human desire for self-improvement and intellectual growth. The recurring characters of Quahog create a rich tapestry of small-town life that feels both familiar and fantastical. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffin's neighbor, might seem like a one-dimensional character focused on his pilot career and romantic pursuits, but deeper examination reveals a man grappling with loneliness and searching for genuine connection. His antagonistic relationship with Brian stems from philosophical differences that reflect real-world political and social divisions. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter represents the kind of loyal, enduring male friendship that many viewers find deeply comforting. Despite moving away to star in his own show and eventually returning, Cleveland's bond with Peter remains unchanged, speaking to the timeless nature of true friendship. Their shared history, from high school through adulthood, creates a sense of continuity and stability in an otherwise chaotic world. Joe Swanson's story as a disabled police officer adds layers of representation and resilience to the show's universe. His determination to maintain his career and active lifestyle despite his paralysis, combined with his role as a devoted husband and father, makes him an inspiring figure. The friendship between Joe, Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland represents different aspects of masculinity and how men can support each other through life's challenges. The town of Quahog itself has a rich history that's been revealed gradually throughout the series. From its founding by seemingly ordinary settlers to its hidden connections to major historical events, Quahog represents the idea that every small town has secrets and stories worth telling. The various businesses, from the Drunken Clam Bar to the Quahog Mini Mart, create a sense of place that feels lived in and authentic. The Drunken Clam, in particular, serves as a sanctuary for the male characters, a place where they can escape the responsibilities and pressures of adult life. The dim lighting, the familiar faces, and the comfortable routine of sharing drinks and conversation create an atmosphere that many viewers find deeply relaxing and nostalgic. Family Guy's approach to continuity is uniquely comforting for late-night viewing. While the show often resets situations and ignores consequences for comedic purposes, certain elements remain constant. Entity, the family's love for each other, their shared experiences, and the fundamental dynamics that define their relationships. This selective continuity creates a dreamlike quality where anything can happen, but the core emotional truths remain unchanged. The show's frequent flashbacks and cutaway gags, while often dismissed as random humor, actually serve to expand the universe's mythology. Each glimpse into a character's past, each reference to historical events, and each bizarre scenario adds another layer to the show's complex tapestry. These moments create a sense that the characters have rich, full lives beyond what we see in the main episodes. The musical elements of Family Guy deserve special recognition for their soothing qualities. From Lois's piano performances to the elaborate musical numbers that occasionally take over entire episodes, music serves as a unifying force in the Griffin household. These musical moments often reveal character, emotions, and relationships in ways that dialogue alone cannot, creating some of the series' most genuinely touching scenes. The show's treatment of holidays and traditions provides a comforting structure that mirrors real family life. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and birthday celebrations create anchor points throughout the series, giving viewers familiar touchstones that feel like returning home. The way the Griffin family celebrates these occasions, with all their chaos and love, reflects the messy reality of actual family gatherings. Peter's various schemes and adventures, while often absurd, follow certain patterns that create a sense of predictability within unpredictability. His enthusiasm for new projects, his inevitable complications, and his family's support, despite their exasperation, create a comfortable rhythm that's perfect for relaxation. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that no matter how crazy Peter's latest idea gets, everything will work out in the end. The relationship between the Griffin family and their extended family members adds another layer of complexity to the show's lore. Lois's wealthy parents, the Pewterschmidts, represent old money and social expectations, while Peter's working-class background creates natural tensions that many viewers can relate to. These family dynamics play out over multiple episodes and seasons, creating long-term storylines that reward dedicated viewers. The show's occasional ventures into science fiction and fantasy elements expand the universe beyond the boundaries of realistic suburban life. Time travel episodes, alternate dimension stories, and encounters with supernatural beings suggest that the Family Guy universe operates on different rules than our own, where anything is possible, and wonder lurks around every corner. As we wind down our journey through Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth reflecting on what makes this chaotic comedy so unexpectedly soothing when viewed through the lens of lore and continuity. Perhaps it's the underlying message that families, despite their flaws and conflicts, ultimately stick together. Maybe it's the comfort of familiar characters and settings that feel like old friends. Or possibly it's the show's ability to find humor and humanity in even the most absurd situations. The Griffin family, for all their dysfunction and chaos, represents something fundamentally hopeful about human nature. They make mistakes, they hurt each other's feelings, they get into ridiculous situations, but they always come back together. They forgive, they support each other, and they continue to grow and change as individuals while maintaining their core family bond. So as you close your eyes tonight, let your mind wander through the streets of Quahog, past the familiar houses and landmarks, into the warm glow of 31 Spooner Street, where a family gathers each evening, sharing meals, stories, and love, despite all their imperfections. In that comfortable, chaotic, deeply human space, perhaps you'll find the peace and rest you've been searching for. Sweet dreams. And remember, no matter how crazy life gets, there's always home. There's always family, and there's always tomorrow to try again. The lore of Family Guy reminds us that even in the most unlikely places, we can find stories worth telling, characters worth loving, and moments worth treasuring. Rest well, knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, the Griffin family continues their eternal dance of chaos and love, providing comfort to viewers around the world who find solace in their familiar dysfunction and unwavering devotion to each other. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy was actually canceled twice before becoming one of the most successful animated shows in television history? Or why Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks, but a twist of fate involving a hangover literally saved his life? Today we're diving deep into the hidden world of Family Guy lore that will completely change how you watch this iconic show. Most people think they know everything about the Griffin family, but the truth is, there are layers of secrets, controversies, and mind-blowing, behind-the-scenes stories that Fox never wanted you to discover. From voice actors who were replaced without anyone noticing, to episodes that were banned from ever airing again, we're about to uncover the most shocking Family Guy secrets that have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. But first, let me blow your mind with something that happened before the show even premiered. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He had a ticket, his bags were packed, and he should have been on that plane. But here's the crazy part that nobody talks about. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before. That hangover literally saved his life and changed the entire trajectory of television comedy. Think about it for a second. If MacFarlane had made that flight, there would be no Family Guy, no American Dad, no The Orville, no billion-dollar animation empire. One night of partying in 2001 accidentally preserved one of the most influential creators in modern entertainment. But that's just the beginning of how strange and interconnected the Family Guy universe really gets. Let's start with something that will mess with your head every time you watch the show from now on. Mila Kunis, the voice of Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started voicing the character. 14. She literally grew up recording in that booth, and her voice changing during puberty became part of Meg's character development. But here's the part that's even more insane. She lied about her age to get the job. When Kunis auditioned, she told the casting directors she was 18. She figured by the time they found out the truth, she'd already be established in the role. Her gamble paid off, but it created a bizarre situation where a teenage girl was voicing sexual jokes in adult situations that she wasn't even old enough to fully understand. The writers had to be careful about what lines they gave Meg because they had a minor in the recording booth. Speaking of voice acting mysteries, here's something that will make you question everything you think you know about the show's consistency. Phyllis Diller, the legendary comedian, was originally supposed to be the voice of Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin. She recorded several episodes worth of dialogue before the creators decided to kill off the character and replace her with Alex Borstein voicing Peter's new mother-in-law, Barbara Puderschmidt. But the weirdest part isn't that they changed voice actors, it's that they kept some of Phyllis Diller's recorded lines and mixed them with Alex Borstein's voice work in certain episodes. If you listen carefully to some of the early season episodes, you can actually hear the subtle differences in vocal tone and delivery that reveal this hidden voice actor swap that most fans never noticed. Now let's talk about the episode that almost destroyed Family Guy before it even became successful. The episode called When You Wish Upon a Weinstein was considered so controversial that it was pulled from Fox's lineup and didn't air until years later on Cartoon Network. The episode dealt with Peter wanting his family to convert to Judaism because he believed Jewish people were naturally good with money. The controversy wasn't just about the content, it was about the timing. This episode was supposed to air just months after the September 11th attacks, when religious tensions were at an all-time high. Fox executives were terrified that the episode would spark protests, boycotts, and potentially violent reactions. They locked the episode away and pretended it didn't exist for nearly 3 years. But here's what makes this story even more complex. Seth MacFarlane fought tooth and nail to get the episode aired because he believed it was actually pro-Jewish and was celebrating Jewish culture rather than mocking it. He felt that Fox was being cowardly and missing the point of the satire entirely. The battle over this one episode created a rift between MacFarlane and Fox executives that influenced how the show was handled for years afterward. This brings us to one of the most shocking secrets in Family Guy history. The show was actually canceled twice, and both times it came back from the dead through pure accident. The first cancellation happened after season 2, because Fox executives thought the show was too expensive to produce and wasn't attracting the right demographic. They wanted younger viewers, but Family Guy was primarily watched by college students and adults. Here's where it gets interesting. After the cancellation, Cartoon Network picked up the reruns and started airing them late at night. The show found its audience in this late-night slot, with viewers who were exactly the demographic Fox had been trying to reach. College students would come home from parties and watch Family Guy marathons until sunrise. The show became a cultural phenomenon through syndication, something that had never happened before with an animated series. The DVD sales were equally shocking. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling television DVDs of all time, outselling many major Hollywood movies. Fox executives couldn't ignore the numbers anymore. They had accidentally created a gold mine and then thrown it away. The revival of Family Guy, after its first cancellation, changed how television networks think about syndication and DVD sales forever. But the second cancellation is even more bizarre. After bringing the show back, Fox canceled it again after season 4 because they claimed it wasn't performing well in its Sunday night time slot. What they didn't tell anyone was that they were deliberately sabotaging the show by moving it around the schedule constantly. Some episodes aired on different nights without any promotion, making it nearly impossible for fans to keep track of when new episodes were airing. Seth MacFarlane was so frustrated with Fox's treatment of the show that he seriously considered moving Family Guy to a different network entirely. Comedy Central and Cartoon Network both made offers to pick up the series, which would have been unprecedented at the time. The idea of a major animated series switching networks mid-run had never happened before. What saved Family Guy the second time wasn't fan campaigns or DVD sales. It was the iTunes revolution. When Family Guy episodes became available for digital purchase, they consistently ranked as some of the most downloaded television content. Fox suddenly realized they had a digital goldmine on their hands and brought the show back for a third time. Now let's dive into some character secrets that will change how you see the Griffin family forever. Brian Griffin, the talking dog, was originally supposed to be much more of a background character. Seth MacFarlane voices Brian himself, and the character was initially just meant to provide occasional witty commentary. But MacFarlane found that Brian's voice came so naturally to him that he started writing more and more scenes for the character. Here's the mind-bending part. Brian Griffin is essentially Seth MacFarlane's alter ego. Almost every political opinion, cultural reference, and intellectual observation that comes out of Brian's mouth reflects MacFarlane's actual views. When Brian goes on rants about politics, religion, or social issues, you're literally hearing Seth MacFarlane's personal opinions filtered through a cartoon dog character. This became controversial when fans started to notice that Brian was becoming increasingly preachy and self-righteous in later seasons. Critics accused MacFarlane of using the character as a mouthpiece for his liberal political views, turning Family Guy into a platform for his personal agenda. The backlash became so intense that MacFarlane actually killed off Brian in a shocking episode, only to bring him back a few episodes later after massive fan outrage. But the Brian death episode reveals something even more interesting about how Family Guy operates behind the scenes. The writers had been planning Brian's temporary death for over a year, and they deliberately leaked fake spoilers to throw fans off the scent. They created elaborate fake scripts and even recorded fake voice acting sessions to maintain the secrecy of their plan. Stewie Griffin presents another layer of hidden complexity that most viewers completely miss. The character was originally designed to be a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. But as the show evolved, Stewie became more complex, and his sexuality became a subject of constant speculation and debate. Seth MacFarlane has given contradictory statements about Stewie's sexual orientation over the years, sometimes saying the character is gay, sometimes saying he's too young for sexuality to matter, and sometimes saying it's deliberately ambiguous. But here's what most people don't know. There are actually two different versions of Stewie, depending on who he's interacting with. When Stewie talks to Brian, he's portrayed as intelligent, sophisticated, and possibly gay. When he interacts with his family members, he's more like a regular baby with occasional moments of evil genius behavior. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate, creative choice that reflects how different people see us differently in various relationships and contexts. The Stewie and Brian dynamic became so popular that entire episodes started focusing exclusively on their adventures together. These episodes, often called road trip episodes by fans, consistently rank among the most popular Family Guy episodes of all time. The chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's two most personal character voices created some of the show's most memorable moments. Let's talk about the celebrity guest stars and the shocking stories behind their appearances. When Drew Barrymore appeared on the show, she was going through a particularly difficult period in her personal life. The recording session was supposed to take 2 hours, but she stayed for 6 hours because she was having so much fun with the cast and crew. She later said that working on Family Guy was therapeutic during a time when she was struggling with addiction issues. But the most surprising celebrity appearance almost never happened. Patrick Stewart, who voices Susie Swanson, initially turned down the role because he thought the show was too crude and beneath his classical theater background. It was only after his agent convinced him to watch several episodes that he realized the show's intelligence hidden beneath its seemingly juvenile humor. Stewart became so invested in the character that he started suggesting storylines and character developments for Susie. He even offered to voice additional characters for free because he enjoyed the creative process so much. His enthusiasm for the show shocked many of his colleagues in classical theater who couldn't understand why a Shakespearean actor would want to be associated with Family Guy. The show's relationship with censorship creates another layer of hidden stories that most fans never hear about. There's an entire archive of Family Guy jokes, scenes, and episodes that were deemed too controversial to ever air. Some of these involve real celebrities who threatened legal action, while others were considered too offensive even for Family Guy's notoriously boundary-pushing standards. One particular episode that was completely scrapped dealt with Lois having an affair with a character based on a real-life politician. The episode was fully animated and voice recorded before Fox executives realized the potential legal and political ramifications. The entire episode was locked away and will likely never see the light of day. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Family Guy lore involves the show's influence on other animated series. South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone have had a long-running feud with Seth MacFarlane, claiming that Family Guy relies too heavily on random pop culture references instead of actual jokes. This feud played out in several South Park episodes that directly mocked Family Guy's writing style. The rivalry became so intense that it actually influenced how both shows developed their comedy. Family Guy started incorporating more story-driven humor to counter South Park's criticism, while South Park began using more visual gags and pop culture references to prove they could do Family Guy's style better than Family Guy itself. Here's something that will completely change how you watch Family Guy cutaway gags from now on. Those random flashback scenes that seem completely disconnected from the main plot? Many of them are actually recycled jokes from Seth MacFarlane's college animation projects and failed pilot episodes. The writers have been mining MacFarlane's old material for decades, updating and reworking jokes that were originally created in the 1,990 seconds. Some of the most popular Family Guy moments are actually 20-year-old jokes that have been given new animation and context. The peanut butter jelly time sequence, one of the show's most famous moments, was based on an internet meme that MacFarlane had been wanting to incorporate into his work for years before Family Guy even existed. As Family Guy approaches its 25th season, these hidden stories and secret histories continue to shape how the show develops. Seth MacFarlane has hinted that there are major revelations about the Griffin family that haven't been revealed yet, suggesting that even longtime fans don't know everything about these characters they've been watching for decades. The show that started as a simple animated sitcom has become a complex web of cultural commentary, personal expression, and industry politics that extends far beyond what appears on screen. Every episode carries the weight of canceled seasons, industry battles, and creative compromises that most viewers never suspect. Understanding this hidden lore doesn't just make Family Guy more interesting. It reveals how the entire landscape of adult animation has been shaped by the accidents, controversies, and creative battles that brought the Griffin family to life and kept them alive against all odds. Ever find yourself tossing and turning at night, your brain buzzing with random thoughts? Well, tonight we're diving into something that'll either put you right to sleep or keep you awake with fascinating tidbits about one of television's most controversial animated families. Get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me share some incredibly random Family Guy facts that'll drift through your mind like counting sheep. Picture this. It's 1999, and television is about to change forever. A brand new animated show is about to premiere that would become one of the most talked about series in entertainment history. But here's something most people don't know. Family Guy almost never happened at all. The pilot episode was actually rejected multiple times before finally getting picked up. Seth MacFarlane had to fight tooth and nail just to get his vision on screen, and even then, the network executives weren't entirely convinced it would work. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, Here's a mind-blowing fact that might surprise you. He was originally supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but he missed the flight because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. That hangover quite literally saved his life and allowed him to continue creating the show we know today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different television history could have been. Now, let's talk about something that'll really mess with your head. You know Brian Griffin, the intellectual talking dog? Well, his character was almost completely different. In the original concept, Brian was going to be much more dog-like, basically just a regular pet who occasionally made witty observations. But McFarlane decided to make him more human-like because he wanted a character who could serve as the voice of reason in the quappling, chaotic Griffin household. This decision fundamentally changed the entire dynamic of the show. Here's another random tidbit that might drift you off to dreamland. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally planned to become recurring segments. The first chicken fight was just supposed to be a one-off gag in Season 2. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to bring it back again and again. These fights became so popular that they're now considered one of the show's signature elements, even though they started as basically an inside joke among the production team. You know those cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for? The ones that start with, "This is worse than that time when," or "Remember when?" Well, here's something fascinating about how they came to be. McFarlane got the idea from old variety shows and comedy sketches he watched as a kid. He wanted to create something that felt like channel surfing, where you'd suddenly jump to a completely different scene or time period without warning. The writing team actually keeps a massive database of potential cutaway gags, and they have hundreds of unused ideas just sitting there waiting for the right episode. Let me tell you about something that happened during the show's darkest period. When Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, something unprecedented occurred. The show's reruns on Adult Swim became so popular that they actually brought in higher ratings than most news shows on primetime television. This had never happened before in television history. A canceled show was literally outperforming current programming just through reruns. The DVD sales were breaking records too, which ultimately convinced Fox to bring the show back from the dead. This revival made Family Guy one of the first major television shows to be brought back purely because of fan demand and aftermarket success. It changed how networks think about canceled shows and basically created the template for how fan campaigns could save their favorite programs. Pretty remarkable when you think about how social media wasn't even a factor back then. This was all done through word of mouth, online forums, and DVD purchases. Here's a random fact about Stewie Griffin that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally designed that way. The early character sketches showed him with a more traditionally round baby head. But McFarlane kept adjusting the proportions, making the head more and more elongated because he thought it made Stewie look more sinister and alien-like. The final design was actually inspired by the shape of a rugby ball, which McFarlane thought gave Stewie a more intellectual, almost extraterrestrial appearance. Speaking of Stewie, his accent is another interesting story. McFarlane originally performed the character with a standard American accent, but during recording sessions, he started experimenting with different voices. The posh British accent that became Stewie's trademark was actually inspired by Rex Harrison's performance as Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady. McFarlane thought the sophisticated accent would create a funny contrast with Stewie being just a baby, and it became one of the character's most distinctive features. Now here's something that'll really blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 10 months to complete from start to finish. That means the episodes you're watching tonight were actually being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process is incredibly complex, with each episode requiring hundreds of individual drawings and countless hours of voice work, sound design, and editing. It's like a massive assembly line that never stops moving. The voice acting sessions are pretty fascinating too. Unlike many animated shows where actors record their Borges lines separately, the Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates more natural conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and quagmire, and he often has to have conversations with himself, switching between voices mid-sentence. The other actors say it's both impressive and slightly disturbing to watch. Here's a random detail about the show's animation style. The characters are deliberately drawn with simple, clean lines because McFarlane wanted them to be easy to animate quickly. This was partly a practical decision. More complex designs would have made production much more expensive and time-consuming. But it also gave the show a distinctive look that set it apart from more detailed animations like The Simpsons. The simplicity actually became part of the show's charm. Let's talk about something that happened behind the scenes during the show's peak years. The writing room had a very specific creative process that sounds almost ritualistic. Every morning, the writers would gather and pitch random ideas, no matter how weird or nonsensical they seemed. These brainstorming sessions could last for hours, with writers building on each other's ideas and creating increasingly elaborate scenarios. Many of the show's most memorable moments came from these spontaneous creative explosions. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's pretty remarkable. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and airs in over 100 countries worldwide. But here's the interesting part. Different countries have different censorship standards, so episodes are often edited differently depending on where they're broadcast. Some countries remove certain religious references, others cut violent scenes, and some even change dialogue to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. The merchandising aspect of Family Guy is another fascinating rabbit hole. The show has spawned everything from action figures to breakfast cereals to mobile games. But one of the most successful merchandise lines has been the talking Stewie dolls, which were initially rejected by toy companies because they thought parents wouldn't want their children playing with a toy that made sarcastic and sometimes inappropriate comments. When they finally got produced, they became one of the best-selling animated character toys of the early 2000s. Let's drift into some trivia about the show's music. Family Guy features more original songs than most animated series, and many of them have become surprisingly popular. The song Shapoopy from the episode Mission Impossible actually led to increased sales of the original 1,957 Broadway recording. Seth MacFarlane's love of classic American standards heavily influences the show's musical choices, and he often uses the characters to perform songs from the Great American Songbook. Here's something that might help you fall asleep. The show's approach to continuity is intentionally loose and dreamlike. Unlike shows that maintain strict chronological order and character development, Family Guy treats each episode almost like a separate universe. Characters die and come back, relationships reset, and events from previous episodes are often ignored completely. This was a deliberate creative choice to give writers maximum freedom to tell whatever story they wanted without being constrained by what happened before. The show's relationship with controversy has always been complex and evolving. What started as boundary-pushing humor that felt fresh and daring gradually shifted over the years, sometimes crossing lines that made even longtime fans uncomfortable. The writers have acknowledged this evolution, often using the show itself to comment on its own controversial moments. It's like the show became self-aware of its own reputation and started having conversations with its critics through the episodes themselves. As we drift toward the end of our random fact journey, here's something particularly interesting about Family Guy's place in animation history. The show arrived at a perfect moment when adult animation was just beginning to find its footing as a legitimate television genre. The Simpsons had proven that cartoons could be sophisticated and satirical, South Park had shown they could be provocative and current, and Family Guy carved out its own niche by being rapid-fire and referential in ways that felt uniquely modern. The show's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Long before social media memes became a cultural phenomenon, Family Guy was creating bite-sized moments of humor that people would quote and reference online. The cutaway gags, in particular, felt perfectly suited to the short attention spans and random humor that would later dominate platforms like YouTube and TikTok. In many ways, Family Guy predicted the kind of humor that would thrive in the digital age. So, as you settle into sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something larger than just an animated sitcom. It's a cultural artifact that captured a specific moment in entertainment history. When television was becoming more experimental, audiences were hungry for edgier content, and creators were learning to navigate the balance between pushing boundaries and maintaining mass appeal. The show's journey from cancellation to revival to cultural phenomenon mirrors the changing landscape of television itself. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with random cutaway gags and the gentle sound of Peter Griffin's distinctive laugh echoing through your subconscious. These random facts about Family Guy have hopefully given your mind something to wander through as you drift off, proving that even animated chaos can become oddly soothing when filtered through the lens of curiosity and nostalgia. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy has become the ultimate comfort show for falling asleep? Tonight we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece, exploring every hidden detail, running gag, and piece of lore that makes this show the perfect bedtime companion for millions of viewers worldwide. From the moment Peter Griffin first stumbled across our screens in 1999, Family Guy created something unique in television history. Unlike other animated sitcoms that rely on continuous storylines, Family Guy mastered the art of episodic storytelling mixed with an intricate web of callbacks, references, and character development that spans over 2 decades. This combination creates the perfect storm for sleep-time viewing because your brain can follow along without needing to track complex plot threads while still being rewarded with layers of detail that reveal themselves on repeat viewings. The genius of Family Guy's structure lies in its cutaway gags, those seemingly random flashbacks and fantasy sequences that interrupt the main storyline. These moments serve a dual purpose in the sleep experience. They provide natural breakpoints where your mind can drift without losing the narrative thread, while simultaneously creating a dreamlike quality that mirrors the way our brains process information as we fall asleep. When Peter suddenly launches into a story about that time he worked as a Renaissance painter, or when the show cuts to a completely unrelated historical parody, it mimics the random associations our minds make in that drowsy state between waking and sleeping. Let's start with the Griffin family dynamics that form the foundation of this comfort viewing experience. Peter Griffin represents the archetypal bumbling father figure, but his character contains multitudes of backstory that unfold gradually throughout the series. His relationship with his father Francis, his complicated feelings about his biological father, Mickey, and his ongoing rivalry with the giant chicken Ernie create emotional anchors that ground even the most absurd episodes. These family connections provide a sense of stability and familiarity that translates perfectly to bedtime viewing. Lois Griffin serves as both the voice of reason and the enabler of chaos within the family structure. Her wealthy background, her musical aspirations, her brief flirtations with rebellion, and her unwavering devotion to her dysfunctional family create a maternal energy that many viewers find deeply comforting. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of sacrifice, patience, and unconditional love, making them particularly soothing for nighttime consumption. The children of the Griffin household each bring their own unique energy to the sleep-time viewing experience. Meg's perpetual outsider status and her journey through adolescence provide moments of genuine pathos that balance the show's more chaotic elements. Her relationships with various boyfriends, her struggles with self-esteem, and her occasional moments of triumph create emotional beats that feel authentic even within the show's exaggerated reality. Chris Griffin's coming-of-age storylines offer a different kind of comfort, representing the awkwardness and uncertainty of teenage years with a gentle humor that never feels mean-spirited. His artistic talents, his romantic misadventures, and his generally good-hearted nature provide positive emotional anchors throughout the series. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the Family Guy universe. His evolution from world domination-obsessed infant to time-traveling genius to conflicted character, struggling with his identity, represents one of television's most subtle character developments. The episodes focusing on Stewie and Brian's friendship often delve into philosophical territory that can be profoundly relaxing, touching on themes of mortality, purpose, and connection in ways that are both humorous and deeply moving. Brian Griffin deserves special attention in any discussion of Family Guy lore. As the family dog who walks upright, drives cars, and serves as the show's intellectual conscience, Brian embodies the show's ability to blend the absurd with the profound. His struggles with alcoholism, his failed writing career, His romantic relationships and his role as Stewie's best friend create some of the series' most emotionally resonant moments. The Brian-centered episodes often feature slower pacing and more introspective dialogue, making them ideal for winding down at the end of the day. The extended universe of Quahog, Rhode Island, provides an incredibly rich backdrop for sleep-time exploration. The town itself becomes a character, with its recurring locations like the Drunken Clam, the Quahog Mini-Mart, and the various restaurants and businesses that appear throughout the series. These familiar settings create a sense of place and community that many viewers find comforting, like returning to a hometown you know intimately. The show's extensive cast of recurring characters adds layers of familiarity and continuity that enhance the comfort viewing experience. Glenn Quagmire's outrageous behavior and his complex relationship with the Griffin family provides consistent laughs, while also exploring themes of friendship and acceptance. Cleveland Brown's gentle nature and his role as Peter's voice of reason create moments of warmth and stability. Joe Swanson's determination and positive attitude in the face of his disability provide inspiring undertones that balance the show's more irreverent moments. Characters like Mayor Adam West, with his eccentric personality and bizarre mayoral decisions, add a surreal quality that perfectly matches the drowsy state many viewers experience while falling asleep. The various shopkeepers, neighbors, and authority figures who populate Quahog create a lived-in world that feels consistent and reliable, even when the specific storylines venture into complete absurdity. One of Family Guy's greatest strengths for sleep viewing lies in its incredible database of pop culture references and parodies. The show's writers demonstrate an encyclopedic knowledge of movies, television, music, and historical events, creating layers of meaning that reward both casual viewing and deep analysis. These references serve as mental comfort food, triggering positive associations with beloved entertainment from across the decades. The Star Wars parody episodes represent some of the series' most ambitious storytelling, reimagining the classic space opera with Family Guy characters in ways that honor both properties. These special episodes often feature extended sequences with minimal dialogue, beautiful animation, and familiar musical cues that create an almost meditative viewing experience. The show's musical numbers deserve special recognition for their sleep-inducing qualities. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate song and dance routines to Peter's impromptu musical outbursts, these sequences often slow down the show's typically frenetic pace and create moments of genuine artistry. The musical episodes, in particular, offer extended periods of melody and rhythm that can be incredibly soothing for bedtime viewing. Family Guy's approach to continuity creates a unique viewing experience that rewards long-term fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. The show references its own history constantly, with characters acknowledging previous episodes, recurring gags that span multiple seasons, and character development that unfolds gradually over hundreds of episodes. This creates a sense of narrative investment that makes viewers feel like part of an ongoing story, even when individual episodes are completely self-contained. The death and resurrection of Brian Griffin represents one of the show's most emotionally impactful storylines, demonstrating the writer's ability to generate genuine emotion even within their typically irreverent framework. The audience's passionate response to Brian's temporary death revealed how deeply viewers had connected with these characters, creating a shared cultural moment that enhanced the show's comfort viewing appeal. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie and Brian exploring different historical periods and alternate realities add science fiction elements that expand the show's universe in fascinating directions. These episodes often feature more sophisticated storytelling techniques and explore philosophical concepts about causality, free will, and the nature of reality, providing intellectual stimulation that can be both engaging and relaxing. Family Guy's holiday episodes deserve special mention for their comfort viewing qualities. The Christmas episodes, in particular, often feature more sentimental storylines, beautiful animation, and themes of family, forgiveness, and redemption that create perfect nighttime viewing experiences. These episodes typically balance the show's signature humor with genuine emotional moments that leave viewers feeling warm and satisfied. The show's exploration of religion, politics, and social issues often provides thought-provoking content that can stimulate interesting mental discussions as viewers drift off to sleep. While Family Guy never shies away from controversial topics, It typically approaches them with enough humor and absurdity to avoid being genuinely upsetting, making these episodes suitable for relaxation while still engaging with important themes. The animation style itself contributes significantly to the show's sleep-friendly qualities. The bright colors, simple character designs, and fluid movement create a visually pleasing experience that's easy on the eyes during nighttime viewing. The show's visual gags often work on multiple levels, providing immediate laughs while also rewarding careful observation with hidden details and background jokes. Family Guy's voice acting deserves recognition for creating characters that feel like old friends to longtime viewers. Seth MacFarlane's performance as Peter, Brian, and Stewie demonstrates incredible range and consistency, while the supporting voice cast brings depth and personality to even minor characters. This vocal familiarity creates an audio comfort zone that many viewers find deeply relaxing. The show's writing style blends rapid-fire jokes with slower, more contemplative moments, creating a rhythm that matches the natural ebb and flow of consciousness as people fall asleep. The cutaway gags provide natural segues between different energy levels, while the main storylines maintain enough coherence to follow without requiring intense concentration. Family Guy's cultural impact extends far beyond television, with its characters, quotes, and references becoming part of the broader cultural lexicon. This cultural penetration means that viewers often encounter Family Guy references in their daily lives, reinforcing their connection to the show and enhancing its comfort viewing appeal. The show's longevity itself contributes to its effectiveness as comfort viewing. With over 20 seasons and hundreds of episodes, Family Guy offers an almost inexhaustible supply of content for bedtime viewing. This extensive catalog means that viewers can experience the comfort of familiarity while still discovering new details and jokes they may have missed in previous viewings. The international versions and translations of Family Guy add another layer to its global appeal, with different cultures finding their own ways to connect with the Griffin family's adventures. This worldwide popularity creates a sense of shared experience that transcends cultural boundaries, making Family Guy a truly universal comfort viewing experience. As we wrap up this deep dive into the Family Guy universe, it becomes clear why this animated series has earned its place as the ultimate comfort show for millions of viewers worldwide. Its unique combination of episodic storytelling, rich character development, extensive pop culture knowledge, and perfect pacing creates an ideal environment for relaxation and sleep. Whether you're a longtime fan discovering new details in familiar episodes, or a newcomer exploring this vast animated universe for the first time, Family Guy offers a reliable source of comfort, humor, and gentle entertainment that can help ease the transition from the stresses of daily life into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams, and remember, Family Guy will always be there when you need that perfect blend of familiarity and surprise to help you drift off into comfortable slumber. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off to sleep, but your mind is still buzzing. Maybe you need something to help you unwind, something familiar and comforting that won't keep you too engaged. Well, tonight we're diving into the weird and wonderful world of Family Guy with some absolutely wild facts that might just be the perfect bedtime companion. These aren't your typical trivia tidbits. We're talking about the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets and bizarre details that make this show the cultural phenomenon it became. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right away. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, then came back in 2005, only to get canceled again in 2007. But here's where it gets interesting. The show's resurrection wasn't because of some executive's change of heart or a passionate fan campaign, though those things helped. It was actually because of DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim that proved the show had a massive audience that networks had completely missed. The numbers were staggering. When Fox looked at the DVD sales figures, they realized they'd made a colossal mistake. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, moving over 1 million copies in its first year. Adult Swim was paying Fox millions for the rerun rights, and the ratings were through the roof. It was like discovering you'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket, except you could still fish it out of the trash. But here's something even weirder about the show's cancellation drama. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually somewhat relieved when it got canceled the first time. He was completely burned out from working insane hours, writing, voice acting, and overseeing every aspect of production. The guy was doing the voices for 3 main characters while running the entire show. When Fox pulled the plug, he thought his animation career might be over, but he also felt like he could finally breathe again. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a fact that'll keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the flight that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He missed it because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, and he showed up to the gate 10 minutes after boarding had ended. He was hungover from partying the night before and almost didn't go to the airport at all. That single hangover and miscommunication might have changed television history forever. Now let's talk about something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single Conway Twitty cutaway gag. You know those random moments where the show just cuts to the country singer performing for what feels like an eternity? Those weren't just random filler. They were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of trolling both the network and the audience. He knew these segments would drive people absolutely crazy, but he also knew they couldn't be cut because they were integral to reaching the episode's required runtime. The Conway Twitty thing became such a phenomenon that it spawned its own internal mythology at the show. Writers would pitch entire episodes around how they could work in a Conway Twitty segment. They'd sit in the writer's room timing these segments down to the second, calculating exactly how much actual story content they could replace with a dead country singer performing on stage. It was comedic genius disguised as laziness. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's voice acting. You know how Brian the dog sounds so sophisticated and intellectual? Well, Seth MacFarlane based that voice on his own natural speaking voice, but slightly more pretentious. He said in interviews that Brian represents the version of himself he'd be if he let his college education go to his head. The character became a way for MacFarlane to explore his own intellectual insecurities and liberal political views through a talking dog. But the really fascinating part is how the other voice actors developed their characters. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different character on a different show MacFarlane was developing. When that project fell through, he remembered her voice and wrote Lois specifically for her. The character's Long Island accent and particular speech patterns are actually based on Borstein's own family members. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has admitted that he sometimes forgets he's supposed to be playing a teenager. He said the character's voice just comes naturally to him because it's basically his own voice from when he was going through puberty, which apparently lasted well into his 20s. The character's dim-witted but lovable personality evolved because Green kept improvising lines that made the writers laugh during recording sessions. Now here's a production fact that'll make you realize how much work goes into seemingly simple animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce, from script to final broadcast. The writing process alone can take several months, with jokes being written, rewritten, and completely scrapped dozens of times. Then there's the voice recording, which happens in multiple sessions as scripts get revised. The animation process is where things get really wild. Every single frame has to be drawn by hand, even though the show uses computer software to assist with the process. A single 22-minute episode contains roughly 16,000 individual drawings. When you think about the fact that the show has produced over 400 episodes, that's literally millions of individual drawings that have brought these characters to life. But here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's cultural impact even more. Family Guy popularized the random cutaway gag format that's now become standard in animated comedy. Before Family Guy, most animated shows followed more traditional narrative structures. The show's willingness to completely abandon the main plot for a 30-second historical recreation or pop culture reference changed how comedy writers think about pacing and attention spans. The cutaway gags themselves have become a cultural phenomenon. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to compiling them, and they've been referenced and parodied by countless other shows. But here's what's really interesting. The writers have admitted that sometimes they write the cutaway gag first, then build an entire episode around finding a way to naturally lead into it. Let's talk about something that might disturb your peaceful drift toward sleep, the show's relationship with censorship. Family Guy has been censored, banned, and protested more than almost any other primetime animated series. The Parents Television Council has named it the worst show on television multiple times. But here's the thing. All that controversy has only made the show more popular. The censorship battles have led to some genuinely creative solutions from the writers. When they can't say certain words or show certain images, they find increasingly elaborate ways to imply them. Some of the show's funniest moments have come from these creative workarounds. It's like watching a comedian perform with their hands tied behind their back and somehow becoming even funnier because of the constraint. Here's a fact about the show's music that might surprise you. Seth MacFarlane is actually a classically trained vocalist who's released several albums of standards and jazz music. His musical background heavily influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. Those aren't just random additions. They're MacFarlane showing off skills he developed long before he ever got into animation. The musical episodes of Family Guy often take months of additional preparation because they require completely different animation techniques, additional voice coaching for the actors, and original orchestral arrangements. The Blue Harvest Star Wars parody episodes alone required hiring an entire orchestra to record new versions of John Williams' iconic themes. Now, let's dive into something that'll make you think about celebrity culture differently. The show's celebrity cameos and parodies have occasionally led to real-world consequences for the celebrities involved. Some stars have embraced being mocked on the show, treating it as a badge of honor. Others have publicly complained or even threatened legal action. But here's what's really fascinating. Some celebrities have specifically requested to be made fun of on Family Guy because they know it'll keep them relevant in pop culture. The show has become such a cultural touchstone that being parodied on it is almost like being inducted into a Hall of Fame of American entertainment figures. The writers have developed an entire system for deciding which celebrities to target. They consider factors like current relevance, comedic potential, and likelihood of legal retaliation. There's literally a legal department that reviews every celebrity reference to make sure the show won't get sued into oblivion. Here's something about the show's international appeal that might keep your mind wandering as you fall asleep. Family Guy airs in over 100 countries, but many episodes have to be heavily edited or completely banned in certain regions due to cultural sensitivities or government censorship. The writers have become experts at predicting which jokes will translate across cultures and which ones will get the show pulled off the air in entire countries. The international dubbing process is particularly fascinating. Voice actors in different countries have to capture not just the literal translations of the jokes, but also the timing, delivery, and cultural references that make the humor work. Sometimes entire scenes have to be rewritten for different markets, with completely different jokes that serve the same narrative function. Speaking of narrative function, here's something about the show's storytelling that might surprise you. Despite its reputation for random, stream-of-consciousness humor, every episode follows extremely strict structural guidelines. The writers use a detailed formula for pacing, character development, and plot progression that's remained virtually unchanged since the show's early seasons. The formula is so precise that new writers go through extensive training to learn it. They practice writing sample episodes that hit specific comedic beats at exact timing intervals. It's like learning to write music in a very particular key and tempo. There's way more technical skill involved than most viewers realize. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the voice actors even more. Most of the main voice cast records their lines together in the same studio, which is actually unusual for animated shows. Many animated series record each actor separately for scheduling convenience. But Family Guy's ensemble cast has developed such strong chemistry that they actually improvise and play off each other during recording sessions. These improvisation sessions have led to some of the show's most memorable moments. Jokes that weren't in the original script, character interactions that reveal new personality traits, and entire comedic sequences that grew out of the actors just goofing around in the studio. The writers have learned to leave space in their scripts for this kind of spontaneous creativity. The show's relationship with current events is another fascinating aspect of its production. Episodes are produced so far in advance that writers have to predict what will be culturally relevant 8 to 9 months in the future. They've developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate which celebrities will still be famous, which political issues will still matter, and which pop culture references will still be funny by the time episodes air. Sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong. leading to episodes that reference celebrities who've completely disappeared from public consciousness or make jokes about events that ended up being resolved in completely different ways. These temporal mismatches have become part of the show's charm, creating accidental time capsules of what people were thinking about during specific periods. Here's something about the show's merchandise empire that might occupy your thoughts as you drift off. Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise sales annually, from t-shirts and mugs to video games and Halloween costumes. The licensing department has to approve thousands of product designs, ensuring that everything maintains the show's comedic voice while being commercially viable. The most successful merchandise items are often the most random ones. Stewie's football head design became a best-selling plush toy. Brian's martini glass became a popular bar accessory. Peter's chicken fight with Ernie became an entire line of action figures. These products have introduced the show to audiences who might never watch it on television. As we wind down our journey through the bizarre world of Family Guy facts, here's one last thing to ponder as you close your eyes. The show has fundamentally changed how we consume comedy. It's trained an entire generation of viewers to expect rapid-fire jokes, constant pop culture references, and narrative structures that can pivot in completely unexpected directions at any moment. This influence extends far beyond television. You can see Family Guy's impact in internet memes, social media humor, and even in how people tell stories in everyday conversation. The show's cutaway gag structure has become a template for how we process and share information in the digital age. Those random tangents and seemingly unrelated references? They're everywhere now, from Twitter threads to TikTok videos. The show created a new language of comedy that's become so pervasive we barely notice it anymore. When someone starts telling a story, then suddenly pivots to a completely unrelated memory that somehow connects back to the original point, they're unconsciously using a Family Guy narrative structure. When someone makes a reference to an obscure piece of pop culture from decades ago to explain something happening today, they're speaking fluent Family Guy. So there you have it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing thousands of individual frames to bring new episodes to life. Voice actors are improvising lines that will make millions of people laugh, and writers are crafting jokes that will still be quoted years from now. The strange, wonderful, chaotic world of Family Guy continues to evolve, one random cutaway gag at a time. Sweet dreams. And remember, if you find yourself having weird dreams about talking dogs, evil babies, or inexplicably long Conway Twitty performances, you'll know exactly where those images came from. The show that changed comedy forever has probably infiltrated your subconscious too, joining the ranks of viewers who've been shaped by its unique brand of organized chaos. You know that feeling when you're trying to fall asleep but your brain just won't shut up? Well, tonight we're gonna fix that with some of the most random, weirdly fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to dreamland while learning bizarre trivia about America's most chaotic animated family. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the strange world of Quahog. Let's start with something that might surprise you. The show's creator Seth MacFarlane almost missed his flight on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. But he arrived at the airport just 10 minutes late and missed the boarding. Sometimes, being late really does save your life. This near-miss experience actually influenced some of the show's later episodes, though MacFarlane rarely talks about it publicly. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, did you know he voices 4 of the main characters? Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire are all brought to life by the same person. That's pretty impressive when you think about how different each character sounds. MacFarlane developed Peter's voice by imitating a security guard he knew, while Brian's sophisticated tone was inspired by old Hollywood actors. Stewie's accent, meanwhile, was based on Rex Harrison's performance in My Fair Lady. Here's something that might help you sleep better knowing it exists. There's an entire episode that was banned from television for years. The episode, called Partial Terms of Endearment, dealt with some pretty controversial topics and wasn't aired on Fox until much later. It eventually found its way to DVD releases, but for the longest time, fans had no idea this episode even existed. Sometimes, the most interesting content is the stuff we never get to see. Family Guy has this weird relationship with cancellation that's almost like a bedtime story in itself. The show was canceled, not once, but twice. first in 2002, then again in 2003. But here's where it gets interesting. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox brought it back in 2005. It's like the show kept falling asleep and waking up stronger each time. The fans literally saved it through their dedication, which is pretty heartwarming when you think about it. Let me tell you about some of the guest stars who've appeared on the show that you might not have realized. Patrick Stewart, the distinguished Captain Picard himself, has voiced multiple characters including Susie's arch-nemesis. Rush Limbaugh appeared as himself, and even Phyllis Diller lent her voice to Peter's mother-in-law. The show has attracted everyone from political figures to rock stars, creating this weird mix of high culture and lowbrow humor. There's something oddly soothing about the show's animation process, too. Each episode takes about 8 months to complete from script to screen. The writers spend weeks crafting jokes, the voice actors record their lines multiple times to get the perfect delivery, and then teams of animators bring everything to life frame by frame. It's like watching a very slow, very detailed dream come together. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken started as a throwaway gag, but became one of the show's most beloved running jokes. These elaborate, destruction-filled battles were inspired by old action movies and Jackie Chan films. The animators love creating these sequences because they get to go completely over the top with the destruction and mayhem. There's something almost meditative about watching these absurdly long fight scenes unfold. Here's a fact that connects to real life in an unexpected way. The character of Mayor Adam West was named after the actor who played Batman in the 1960 Seconds TV series. When the real Adam West heard about this, he was so delighted that he agreed to voice the character himself. He continued playing the role until his death in 2017, bringing his own quirky charm to the already eccentric animated mayor of Quahog. The show's musical numbers are surprisingly complex productions. When they create songs like Surfin' Bird or any of their elaborate Broadway-style numbers, they work with professional musicians and composers. Seth MacFarlane, being a trained singer himself, often performs these songs live in recording sessions. The musical episodes require months of additional work, but they've become some of the most memorable moments in the series. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and had its own unique animation style that was slightly more polished than the original Family Guy. When Cleveland returned to Family Guy, the animators had to readjust his character design to match the original show's style. It's like he went away, got a makeover, and had to tone it down when he came back home. The show's pop culture references are researched extensively by a team of writers who specialize in different decades and cultural phenomena. They maintain databases of movie quotes, TV show references, and historical events to ensure their parodies are accurate enough to be funny, but absurd enough to avoid copyright issues. Sometimes they spend weeks perfecting a single throwaway reference that appears for just a few seconds. Stewie's sexuality has been a running mystery throughout the series, with writers deliberately keeping it ambiguous. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's character is meant to be fluid and open to interpretation. This ambiguity has led to countless fan theories and discussions, making Stewie one of the most analyzed characters in animated television. The Griffin House interior has been redesigned multiple times throughout the series, but the exterior has remained remarkably consistent. The house is supposedly located on Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, and the address is 31 Spooner Street. Fans have actually tried to locate this address in real Rhode Island towns, though of course it doesn't exist. Voice actress Alex Borstein, who plays Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different role. She was supposed to voice a minor character, but when they heard her natural speaking voice, they immediately knew she was perfect for Lois. Borstein has mentioned that she sometimes forgets to use Lois's voice in real life and accidentally slips into character during casual conversations. The show's writer's room operates like a comedy laboratory, where jokes are tested, refined, and sometimes completely scrapped. They have a policy where any writer can suggest changes to any joke, no matter how senior or junior they are. This collaborative approach has led to some of the show's most unexpected and brilliant moments. But it also means that some episodes go through dozens of script revisions. Brian's character was almost completely different in the original concept. He was supposed to be a regular dog who couldn't talk, But McFarlane decided that having an intellectual talking dog would create better story opportunities. This decision fundamentally changed the show's dynamic and gave them a character who could serve as both comic relief and philosophical commentary. The infamous Conway Twitty segments, where the show would cut to footage of the real country singer performing entire songs, were actually created as time fillers when episodes ran short. These segments became so popular with fans that the writers started including them intentionally, turning what was essentially animated dead air into a beloved recurring gag. Quagmire's character was inspired by radio DJs from the 1950 Seconds and 1960 Seconds, who had that smooth, slightly sleazy on-air personality. Seth MacFarlane studied old radio shows and interviews to develop Quagmire's distinctive speaking style and his catchphrase, "giggity giggity." The character's appearance was based on classic cartoon characters, but with a modern twist that made him both nostalgic and contemporary. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. The writers often create jokes specifically designed to test the boundaries of what they can get away with on television. They'll write multiple versions of controversial scenes, knowing that some will be cut but hoping that the milder versions will make it to air. It's like an ongoing negotiation with the censors through comedy. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to embrace internet culture and memes before most people knew what memes were. The writers were early adopters of online humor and would incorporate internet jokes into episodes months before they became mainstream. This forward-thinking approach helped keep the show relevant to younger audiences who were spending more time online. The character of Herbert the Pervert was originally supposed to appear in just one episode, but his distinctive voice and creepy personality made him an unexpected fan favorite. The voice actor Alex Borstein came up with Herbert's characteristic whistle and speech pattern on the spot during recording, and it became such an integral part of the character that they couldn't imagine him any other way. Did you know that several Family Guy episodes have been turned into actual comic books? These comics expand on storylines from the show and sometimes feature adventures that would be too expensive to animate. The comic book format allows the writers to explore more complex storylines and include visual gags that might not work as well in animation. The show's approach to celebrity deaths is uniquely irreverent. When famous people pass away, the writers often create memorial segments that are simultaneously respectful and absurd. They've developed a reputation for handling these situations with a mix of genuine tribute and satirical commentary that somehow works better than it should. Joe Swanson's character was created specifically to address representation of disabled characters in animation, but the writers were careful not to make his disability the only thing that defines him. They wanted to show that wheelchair users could be action heroes, fathers, and complex characters with their own storylines and personality quirks that had nothing to do with their physical limitations. The show's animation studio has created detailed model sheets for background characters who appear for just a few seconds. They believe that consistency in character design, even for minor roles, helps create a more believable world. Some of these background characters have their own names and backstories that never make it into episodes, but help the animators understand their roles in Quahog's community. Family Guy's impact on internet culture extends beyond just memes and references. The show pioneered the use of cutaway gags, which became a template for online content creators who needed to create short, punchy comedy segments. Many YouTube comedians cite Family Guy's editing style as an influence on their own work. The series has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces unique challenges in adapting American cultural references for international audiences. In some countries, entire storylines have been changed to make them more culturally relevant, while maintaining the show's essential humor and character dynamics. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something uniquely American about comedy: the ability to find humor in absolutely everything, from the mundane details of suburban life to the biggest questions about existence and meaning. The show's creators understood that laughter can be found anywhere if you're willing to look for it, and sometimes the most random, unexpected moments become the ones we remember most fondly. Sweet dreams, and may your own family adventures be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with a writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland Show. During season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, They rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Picture this. You're settling in for a cozy night, getting ready to drift off into dreamland, but instead of counting sheep, how about we count some truly wild facts about one of television's most unpredictable animated families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll have enough random trivia rattling around in your brain to either help you fall asleep or keep you up all night wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind works. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy almost never existed in the form we know today. Back in the late 90s, Seth MacFarlane was working at Hanna-Barbera, the legendary animation studio behind classics like The Flintstones and The Jetsons. He created a short film called The Life of Larry for his thesis project at the Rhode Island School of Design, which featured many of the characters who would eventually become the Griffin family. The short was so impressive that it caught the attention of Fox executives. But here's where it gets interesting. MacFarlane was only 24 years old when he pitched the show, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to get a primetime animated series greenlit. The original concept was quite different from what we see today. Peter Griffin was initially going to be much more of a traditional sitcom dad. Think more like Homer Simpson, but without the yellow skin. The character's personality evolved significantly during the development process, becoming the lovably obnoxious and often controversial figure we know now. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he drew inspiration from his own father's mannerisms and speech patterns, particularly the distinctive Rhode Island accent that Peter sports throughout the series. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's complexity a bit more surface. The average Family Guy episode contains over 300 individual drawings. Each 22-minute episode requires thousands of hours of work from dozens of artists, animators, and voice actors. The animation process alone takes approximately 8 months from initial script to final product, which explains why the show's production schedule is so carefully planned out years in advance. Speaking of voice acting, Seth MacFarlane performs the voices of 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But here's something that might blow your mind. He records all of their dialogue separately, often having conversations with himself that last for hours. MacFarlane has described the experience as somewhat surreal, especially when he's voicing emotional scenes between characters like Brian and Stewie, who have some of the most complex relationships on the show. The character of Stewie Griffin deserves special attention because his development represents one of the most dramatic character evolution arcs in animated television history. Originally conceived as a straightforward villain baby bent on world domination and matricide, Stewie gradually transformed into a more nuanced character, exploring themes of sexuality, intelligence, and family dynamics. The shift was so gradual that many viewers didn't notice it happening over the course of several seasons. MacFarlane has stated that this evolution was intentional, reflecting his own growth as a writer and his desire to explore more sophisticated storytelling within the animated comedy format. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production involves their approach to cutaway gags, those random tangential moments that have become the show's signature. The writers maintain what they call a gag bank, which is essentially a massive database of potential cutaway ideas that they can draw from when constructing episodes. Some of these gags were written years before they actually appeared on screen, waiting for the right episode and context to make them work. The process of selecting which gags make it into episodes involves multiple rounds of testing and refinement, with the writers constantly evaluating whether a particular joke will land with audiences or fall flat. The show's relationship with controversy has been both a blessing and a curse throughout its run. Family Guy has been canceled twice by Fox, first in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then brought back in 2005 due to strong DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The second cancellation never actually happened, but the show came close several times due to various controversies and ratings fluctuations. What's interesting is that many of the episodes that generated the most controversy also ended up being some of the most popular, suggesting that the show's willingness to push boundaries is intrinsically linked to its success. The voice acting ensemble deserves recognition for their incredible consistency and chemistry. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, actually auditioned for the role while she was performing in the sketch comedy group MAD-TV. Her distinctive voice for Lois was inspired by her own grandmother, and she's mentioned that she sometimes forgets she's not using her natural speaking voice when recording Lois scenes. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, was only 14 years old when she started on the show, making her one of the youngest voice actors to land a major role in prime-time animation. The show's musical elements often go unnoticed, but they represent a significant portion of the production effort. Family Guy features more original music than most animated series, with MacFarlane himself composing many of the songs and musical numbers. His background in musical theater strongly influences these segments, and many episodes feature elaborate musical sequences that require additional voice actors, musicians, and extended animation sequences. The episode Road to the Multiverse alone featured over 40 different animation styles and required nearly double the typical production time. Here's something that might surprise fans of the show's seemingly random humor. Family Guy episodes are actually meticulously structured according to classical comedy writing principles. Each episode follows a 3-act structure with carefully planned pacing and timing. The cutaway gags aren't randomly inserted. They're strategically placed to provide relief from main plot tension or to enhance particular jokes. The writers spend considerable time in the editing process, adjusting the timing of these elements to maximize comedic impact. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has spawned countless internet memes, influenced other animated series, and even affected the way people communicate online. Phrases like, "Oh my God, who the hell cares?" and "What the deuce?" have entered common usage, and the show's irreverent style has influenced everything from advertising to political commentary. The series has also been credited with helping to revive interest in animated comedy among adult audiences, paving the way for shows like Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman. One of the most technically impressive aspects of Family Guy involves their approach to celebrity impressions and guest voices. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest stars over the years, But what's remarkable is how they integrate these appearances into the show's established comic rhythm. Many celebrities have mentioned that recording for Family Guy requires a different approach than traditional voice acting because the timing and delivery style is so specific to the show's aesthetic. The international versions of Family Guy present fascinating variations on the original concept. In different countries, certain cultural references are modified or replaced entirely to make sense to local audiences. The German version, for example, includes completely different cutaway gags that reference German culture and history. These adaptations require not just translation but complete rewriting of significant portions of episodes, essentially creating parallel versions of the same show. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional television writing environment. Writers regularly perform their ideas for each other, and the collaborative process involves a lot of improvisation and spontaneous joke development. MacFarlane has described the experience as one of the most creatively fulfilling aspects of producing the show, and many writers who have worked on Family Guy have gone on to create their own successful comedy series. The show's approach to social commentary often flies under the radar because it's wrapped in such outrageous humor. Many episodes tackle serious subjects like politics, religion, and social justice, but they do so through such an absurdist lens that the commentary becomes almost subliminal. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics while maintaining its primarily comedic focus, though it also means that viewers can interpret the show's messages in wildly different ways. Family Guy's influence on animation technology shouldn't be overlooked either. The show was among the first animated series to extensively use digital animation techniques, and their production pipeline has been studied and emulated by animation studios worldwide. The efficiency of their animation process allows them to produce episodes more quickly than many competing shows, which is part of why they've been able to maintain such a consistent release schedule for so many years. The merchandising empire surrounding Family Guy represents another fascinating aspect of the show's cultural impact. From action figures to clothing lines to video games, the show has spawned a massive array of consumer products. What's interesting is how these products often feature jokes and dusky references that only hardcore fans would understand, creating multiple tiers of engagement with the show's content. The show's relationship with censorship provides insight into how television content standards have evolved over the past 2 decades. Early episodes of Family Guy pushed boundaries that were considered quite shocking at the time, but many of those same jokes would barely register as controversial today. The series has served as a kind of barometer for changing social attitudes about humor, language, and acceptable content on television. Looking at Family Guy's longevity, it's remarkable that a show built around such seemingly random humor has maintained relevance for over 2 decades. Part of this success stems from the flexibility of the format, NEN, because the show isn't tied to realistic character development or consistent continuity. It can adapt to changing cultural contexts much more easily than traditional sitcoms. Characters can be completely different from episode to episode without breaking the show's internal logic. The voice recording process for Family Guy involves some unique challenges that most animated shows don't face. Because so many characters are voiced by the same actors, recording sessions often require complex scheduling to allow for quick character switches. MacFarlane, in particular, has developed techniques for rapidly shifting between his different character voices, sometimes switching between Peter and Brian mid-sentence during recording sessions. Family Guy's impact on comedy writing extends beyond animation, into live-action television and film. Many comedy writers cite the show's fearless approach to offensive humor and its willingness to commit fully to absurd premises as influential in their own work. The show's success proved that audiences were hungry for comedy that didn't follow traditional rules about likability or moral messaging. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy's signature visual style involve more complexity than might be immediately apparent. The seemingly simple character designs actually require precise consistency across hundreds of artists working on each episode. The show maintains detailed style guides that specify everything from the exact curve of Peter's chin to the precise shade of Brian's fur, ensuring visual continuity across different animation teams and production facilities. As we wind down this journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, it's worth noting that the show continues to evolve and surprise audiences after more than 20 years on the air. Whether you love it or hate it, There's no denying that Family Guy has carved out a unique place in television history, pushing boundaries and challenging expectations in ways that few shows ever attempt. So, there you have it, a deep dive into the bizarre, brilliant, and sometimes bewildering universe of Family Guy. From its humble beginnings as a college thesis project to its status as one of the longest-running animated series in television history, the show represents a fascinating case study in how unconventional creativity can find mainstream success. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, literally anything can happen, and usually does. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, But Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Have you ever wondered why a cartoon dog can talk but nobody questions it? Or why a baby genius plots world domination while his parents argue about mundane household problems? Family Guy might seem like random chaos on the surface, but buried beneath all those cutaway gags and pop culture references lies a surprisingly deep well of hidden lore that most fans have never discovered. Today we're diving into the secret backstories, deleted scenes, and creator revelations that completely change how you see the Griffin family forever. Before we start unraveling these mysteries, let me ask you something. How many times have you watched Family Guy and thought you caught every single joke? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because what I'm about to share will make you want to rewatch every episode with completely fresh eyes. From the real reason Stewie's head is shaped the way it is, to the dark truth about why Brian walks on two legs, these aren't just fun facts. These are game-changing revelations that Seth MacFarlane and his team have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show's most iconic character. Stewie Griffin isn't just some random genius baby who happens to speak with a British accent. According to early production notes that surfaced years later, Seth MacFarlane originally conceived Stewie as having a specific psychological condition that explains both his advanced intelligence and his distinctive way of speaking. The creators deliberately designed his football-shaped head as a visual metaphor for the pressure building inside his developing brain, representing the conflict between his infant body and his mature mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. MacFarlane revealed in a rarely seen interview that Stewie's British accent isn't actually British at all. It's what's called a mid-Atlantic accent, the same affected speech pattern used by wealthy Americans in the early 20th century to sound more sophisticated. This detail wasn't chosen randomly. The creators wanted to show that even as a baby, Stewie is already performing a version of himself, putting on airs to match his intellectual superiority complex. Now, you might be thinking this is just creative interpretation, but wait until you hear about the episodes that never made it to air. There was an entire storyline planned for Season 3 that would have revealed Stewie's accent comes from his obsession with old Hollywood films that he watches late at night when the family is sleeping. The episode would have shown him mimicking Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn movies, explaining both his sophisticated vocabulary and his theatrical mannerisms. This backstory was ultimately scrapped because the writers felt it made Stewie too sympathetic and would have undermined his role as the show's primary antagonist. Speaking of characters with hidden depths, let's talk about Brian Griffin. Most people assume he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and considers himself an intellectual. But the real lore behind Brian is much darker than you might expect. In the show's original pitch Bible, Brian wasn't always an anthropomorphic character. He started as a regular dog who gained human-like intelligence through a laboratory experiment gone wrong. This origin story was briefly referenced in early episodes through subtle visual cues that most viewers missed entirely. Remember how Brian occasionally displays knowledge about topics that would be impossible for a regular dog to understand? That's not just for comedic effect. The writers planted clues throughout the series, suggesting that Brian retains fragmented memories from his time as a test subject. His alcoholism isn't just a character quirk for adult humor. It's actually his way of coping with the psychological trauma of having his consciousness artificially altered. The constant drinking helps suppress the disturbing memories of his transformation, which is why he becomes increasingly anxious and neurotic when he's sober for extended periods. This connects to another piece of hidden lore that completely reframes Brian's relationship with the Griffin family. In deleted scenes from the pilot episode, there was supposed to be a moment where Brian accidentally reveals that he remembers being adopted by the Griffins, not born into the family. The implication was that Peter rescued Brian from the laboratory, not knowing about the experiments that had been performed on him. This would explain why Peter treats Brian more like an equal than a pet, and why the rest of the family accepts his human-like behavior without question. But the Brian revelations don't stop there. McFarlane once mentioned in a commentary track that Brian's literary aspirations aren't just pretentious posturing. They're actually his subconscious attempt to document his experiences and process his trauma through fiction. All those terrible novels he writes are supposedly coded accounts of his memories from before the experiments. The reason his writing is so bad isn't because he lacks talent. It's because he's trying to express experiences that his brain can't properly access or understand. Now let's shift gears and talk about Peter Griffin, because there's lore surrounding him that's been hiding in plain sight for years. You know how Peter has all these random jobs throughout the series and somehow always ends up in bizarre situations that no normal person would survive? There's actually a consistent explanation for this that the writers have been building since season 1. Peter isn't just lucky or cartoonishly resilient. According to production notes, he's supposed to represent the concept of the American dream taken to its most absurd extreme. Every job change, every wild adventure, every impossible survival is meant to show how someone with absolutely no qualifications or common sense can still stumble into success in America if they have enough confidence and persistence. But here's the twist that most fans miss. Peter's apparent stupidity isn't natural. It's a learned behavior that he developed as a defense mechanism against the crushing reality of adult responsibility. This theory is supported by episodes where Peter demonstrates surprising competence in specific situations, usually when his family is genuinely threatened. The writers intentionally show glimpses of a more capable Peter to suggest that his buffoonery is partially an act. He plays dumb because it allows him to avoid dealing with complex emotional situations and lets him shirk responsibility for his actions. It's actually a fairly sophisticated psychological portrait, disguised as slapstick comedy. The most mind-blowing piece of Peter lore involves his relationship with his father, Francis. In cutscenes from several episodes, there were supposed to be flashbacks showing that Peter's fear of authority and his rebellious nature stem from having an abusive father who constantly belittled his intelligence. Peter's current behavior is his way of rebelling against Francis even after his death, choosing to embrace stupidity as a form of posthumous defiance. This adds a tragic dimension to Peter's character that completely changes how you interpret his most outrageous moments. Let's move on to Lois, because her hidden backstory might be the most shocking of all. Most viewers see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow puts up with Peter's antics while trying to hold the family together. But there's lore suggesting that Lois is actually the most psychologically complex character in the entire show. Her wealthy background isn't just a plot device for occasional storylines about her family's money. It's the key to understanding her entire personality and motivation structure. According to early character development documents, Lois deliberately chose to marry Peter precisely because he was the opposite of everything her upper-class family expected from her. Her attraction to Peter wasn't romantic love in the traditional sense. It was her way of rebelling against the suffocating expectations of her privileged upbringing. This explains why she stays with Peter despite his obvious flaws and why she occasionally enables his worst behavior instead of putting her foot down. But here's where it gets really interesting. Lois's musical talents and her occasional displays of impressive competence aren't random character traits. They're remnants of the extensive education and training she received growing up in a wealthy family. The piano playing, the singing, the moments where she demonstrates sophisticated knowledge about art or culture, these are all parts of her original identity that she's trying to suppress in favor of her chosen role as a middle-class housewife. There was supposed to be an entire episode arc exploring Lois's internal conflict between her natural capabilities and her chosen lifestyle. The storyline would have revealed that she sometimes resents Peter not because he's difficult to live with, but because staying with him requires her to constantly diminish herself to avoid making him feel inadequate. This dynamic would have added incredible depth to their relationship and explained why their marriage has such a volatile quality. The Lois lore gets even deeper when you consider her relationship with her children. Her overprotectiveness of Meg isn't just maternal instinct. It's actually Lois projecting her own fears about conformity and social acceptance onto her daughter. Lois sees Meg struggling with the same issues she faced growing up, trying to fit in while dealing with family dynamics that set her apart from her peers. The reason Lois sometimes fails to defend Meg effectively is because she's reliving her own teenage trauma through her daughter's experiences. Now we need to talk about Meg, because there's lore surrounding her character that's both heartbreaking and brilliant. Everyone knows that Meg serves as the family scapegoat, constantly bullied and ignored by everyone around her. But according to Seth MacFarlane's original vision, Meg's role in the family isn't accidental. She's deliberately positioned as the emotional lightning rod that keeps the rest of the family functional. In early scripts, there were scenes showing that Meg is actually aware of her role as the family punching bag and has made a conscious decision to accept it because she understands that her family needs someone to blame for their problems. This makes Meg arguably the most mature and self-sacrificing member of the Griffin family, which completely reframes every joke made at her expense. The writers planted subtle clues throughout the series, suggesting that Meg has incredible inner strength and resilience that she hides from everyone around her. Her moments of competence and insight are deliberately rare because she's learned that showing her true capabilities threatens the family's emotional equilibrium. When Meg does stand up for herself, it usually creates chaos that ultimately gets resolved by her returning to her scapegoat role. There's also lore suggesting that Meg's unpopularity at school isn't entirely natural. Some episodes hint that she's unconsciously sabotaging her own social relationships because she's terrified of abandoning her family role. If Meg became popular and confident, she'd have to confront the fact that her family's treatment of her is abusive rather than merely unfortunate. It's easier for her to believe that she deserves the treatment she receives than to acknowledge that her family is fundamentally dysfunctional. The most devastating piece of Meg lore comes from deleted scenes showing her keeping a secret journal where she documents all the cruel things her family says and does to her. But instead of expressing anger or hurt, the journal entries show Meg trying to understand and justify their behavior, constantly blaming herself for not being good enough to earn their love and respect. This transforms Meg from a simple comedy target into a genuinely tragic character whose story reflects real issues about family scapegoating and emotional abuse. Let's talk about some of the broader lore that affects the entire show's universe. Family Guy takes place in a world where cartoon logic applies, but there are consistent rules governing how that logic works. The cutaway gags aren't just random non sequiturs. They're actually windows into alternate realities or parallel dimensions that exist alongside the main Family Guy universe. This explains why the characters in cutaways sometimes have different personalities, or why historical events play out differently than in real life. Seth MacFarlane confirmed in interviews that he conceived the cutaway structure as a way to explore infinite possibilities within the show's framework. Each cutaway represents a potential timeline or alternative version of reality where different choices led to different outcomes. This means that every absurd scenario we see in a cutaway is actually happening somewhere in the broader Family Guy multiverse. This multiverse concept also explains some of the show's apparent continuity errors. When characters die and then reappear later, or when major events get reset without explanation, it's not sloppy writing. It's the show jumping between different dimensional versions of the Griffin family. The Brian death and resurrection storyline was actually a deliberate exploration of this concept, showing viewers what happens when the timeline gets significantly altered. There's also lore about Quahog itself that most viewers never notice. The town isn't just a generic setting for the Griffin family's adventures. It's specifically designed to represent a kind of American purgatory where nothing ever really changes or progresses. The residents of Quahog are stuck in perpetual cycles of the same mistakes and conflicts, which is why the characters can experience dramatic growth in one episode only, to return to their baseline personalities by the next episode. The writers have hidden references throughout the series, suggesting that Quahog exists in a temporal bubble where time moves differently than in the outside world. This explains why the characters never seem to age significantly, and why technological advancement happens inconsistently. It's not that the show ignores the passage of time. It's that Quahog itself is resistant to change, trapping its residents in an eternal present where growth and development are always temporary. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, it's worth noting that much of this information comes from sources that aren't widely available to casual fans. Production notes, deleted scenes, creator interviews, and behind-the-scenes materials reveal a level of thought and planning that's far more sophisticated than the show's reputation might suggest. Seth MacFarlane and his team have created a rich mythology that operates beneath the surface of what appears to be simple shock humor. The next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details we've discussed today. Look for the subtle clues about character motivations, the hints about hidden backstories, and the consistent internal logic that governs even the most absurd situations. You'll discover that this apparently chaotic comedy actually follows carefully constructed rules that make every character more complex and interesting than they initially appear. What's most impressive about Family Guy's hidden lore is how it enhances rather than contradicts the show's comedic elements. Understanding Stewie's psychological complexity makes his schemes funnier, not less funny. Knowing about Brian's tragic backstory adds depth to his pretentious behavior without undermining the humor. Recognizing Meg's secret strength makes her mistreatment more poignant while still allowing the jokes to land. This is the mark of truly sophisticated comedy writing. The best humor comes from characters who feel real and situations that feel authentic, even when they're completely absurd. By building detailed backstories and consistent internal logic, the Family Guy writers created a foundation that supports both genuine emotional moments and outrageous comedic scenarios. So there you have it, the secret lore of Family Guy that changes everything about how you understand the show. From Stewie's artificial accent to Brian's laboratory origins, from Peter's defensive stupidity to Lois's suppressed identity, from Meg's conscious martyrdom to Quahog's temporal peculiarities. These hidden elements transform a seemingly simple cartoon into something much richer and more complex. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? Are there other aspects of Family Guy lore that you think deserve more attention? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. What if I told you that Family Guy was originally supposed to end after just 3 seasons, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11th, which completely changed the show's trajectory? The animated series that millions of people watch every day has some absolutely mind-blowing secrets hiding beneath its crude humor and cutaway gags that most fans have never heard about. I've spent countless hours diving deep into the production history, behind-the-scenes drama, and hidden connections that make Family Guy one of the most fascinating shows on television. From celebrity feuds that shaped entire storylines to animation techniques that revolutionized the industry, this show has more layers than you might imagine. Let me take you on a journey through the most incredible Family Guy secrets that will completely change how you watch the show. We're going to uncover everything from the real-life inspirations behind your favorite characters to the corporate battles that almost killed the series multiple times. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Stewie, Peter, or even Brian the same way again. First, let's talk about something that literally saved Seth MacFarlane's life and indirectly saved Family Guy from never existing. On September 11th, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that hit the World Trade Center. He had a ticket and was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning. The only reason he survived was because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, telling him the flight left at 8:15 when it actually left at 7:45. MacFarlane overslept, arrived at the airport, and discovered he had missed his flight by just 10 minutes. He was initially frustrated about missing the flight and having to reschedule his meetings in Los Angeles. It wasn't until he was sitting in the airport waiting area that he saw the news reports and realized the plane he was supposed to be on had crashed into the North Tower. This near-death experience profoundly impacted MacFarlane's approach to Family Guy. The show's later seasons began incorporating more political commentary and social satire, partly because MacFarlane felt he had been given a second chance to use his platform meaningfully. The controversial episodes that tackle everything from religion to politics can be traced back to this life-changing moment when MacFarlane realized how fragile life really is. But that's just the beginning of Family Guy's incredible origin story. The show itself was born from MacFarlane's college thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design. He created a 9-minute animated short called The Life of Larry, featuring a character named Larry Cummings, who was essentially a prototype for Peter Griffin. The animation was crude, the jokes were simpler, but the DNA of Family Guy was already there. What's absolutely fascinating is that MacFarlane submitted this college project to the animation studio Hanna-Barbera, and they were so impressed they hired him immediately. He was just 22 years old and suddenly found himself working on shows like Johnny Bravo and Cow and Chicken. But MacFarlane had bigger dreams for his Larry character. He spent 2 years developing and refining the concept, eventually creating another short film called Larry and Steve, which featured the first appearance of a Brian-like dog character. This short caught the attention of Fox executives who were desperately looking for animated content to compete with The Simpsons. The network gave MacFarlane an unprecedented deal, making him the youngest executive producer in television history at age 24. The character inspirations go much deeper than most people realize. Peter Griffin wasn't just a random creation. He was actually based on a security guard that MacFarlane knew during his time working at Hanna-Barbera. This security guard had the same loud, obnoxious personality and even shared some of Peter's physical characteristics. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he would observe this guard's behavior and mannerisms, essentially using him as a real-life reference for what would become one of television's most iconic characters. Stewie Griffin's character has an even more complex origin story. Initially, MacFarlane envisioned Stewie as a completely different type of character. In the original concept, Stewie was going to be much more obviously evil and would have actually succeeded in some of his schemes to kill Lois. The character was inspired by the child villain from a 1970 seconds British film, but MacFarlane realized that having a baby actually commit murder would make the show too dark for network television. The decision to make Stewie more ambiguously evil and eventually more sympathetic was one of the best creative choices the show ever made. It allowed the character to evolve over multiple seasons, becoming less focused on matricide and more focused on time travel, world domination, and his complex relationship with Brian. This evolution wasn't planned from the beginning, but happened organically as the writers discovered what worked best for the character. Speaking of Brian, his character represents something unprecedented in animated television. While other shows had featured talking animals, Brian was the first cartoon dog to be treated as a complete intellectual equal to the human characters. MacFarlane made a conscious decision to never explain how Brian learned to talk or why he's so intelligent compared to other dogs in the show's universe. This creative choice was actually controversial within the animation industry because it broke the traditional rules of cartoon logic. Most animated shows establish clear parameters for their fantastical elements, but Family Guy deliberately leaves Brian's abilities unexplained. This ambiguity allows the character to function as both comic relief and serious dramatic foil, depending on what the story requires. The show's distinctive cutaway gag structure wasn't part of the original concept either. In the early episodes, Family Guy followed a more traditional sitcom structure with linear storytelling. The famous random cutaways that interrupt the main plot were actually added later when MacFarlane realized they could use these moments to explore more surreal and experimental types of humor. These cutaways became the show's signature element, but they also created massive production challenges. Each cutaway requires additional character designs, backgrounds, and sometimes entirely different animation styles. A single episode might feature dozens of different mini-scenes that have nothing to do with the main plot, essentially making every Family Guy episode like 3 or 4 different shows combined into one. The voice acting process reveals another fascinating layer of the show's complexity. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. What most people don't realize is that he records all of these voices in different sessions to maintain consistency. He can't switch between the voices quickly enough during regular recording sessions, so each character's dialogue is recorded separately and then edited together. MacFarlane has mentioned that Peter Griffin's voice is the most physically demanding because it requires him to strain his vocal cords to achieve that distinctive gravelly tone. After long recording sessions, MacFarlane sometimes loses his natural speaking voice temporarily because of the physical stress of performing Peter's dialogue. The show's relationship with censorship has created some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories in television history. Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, but there's actually a sophisticated system of negotiations between the writers and network censors. The writers deliberately include jokes that they know will be rejected, using them as bargaining chips to keep the jokes they really want. This strategy has allowed Family Guy to get away with content that would never make it onto other network shows. The censors focus their attention on the obviously problematic material, which gives the writers cover to include more subtle but equally controversial content. It's essentially a game of misdirection that happens during every episode's production process. One of the most significant moments in Family Guy history happened when the show was actually canceled by Fox in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives felt the show was too expensive to produce and wasn't attracting enough viewers in key demographics. This cancellation seemed like the end of the story, but something unprecedented happened next. The show's reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block became incredibly popular, attracting larger audiences than the original Fox broadcasts had achieved. Simultaneously, the Family Guy DVD sales broke records for animated television releases. Fans were literally buying seasons of a canceled show faster than DVDs of shows that were still in production. This combination of strong cable ratings and exceptional DVD sales convinced Fox to bring Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled series in television history to be revived based primarily on home video performance. The revival created a new business model that other networks began copying, proving that traditional ratings weren't the only way to measure a show's value. The resurrection of Family Guy also changed how the show approached storytelling. When MacFarlane returned to production, he knew the show had been given an unlikely second chance, and this awareness influenced the writing in subtle but important ways. The characters became more self-aware, the jokes became more metatextual, and the show began directly addressing its own cancellation and revival in various episodes. Behind the scenes, the animation process for Family Guy utilizes techniques that most viewers never notice, but which significantly impact the show's distinctive look. Unlike many other animated series that use traditional cell animation or simple digital techniques, Family Guy employs a hybrid approach that combines hand-drawn character animation with digitally created backgrounds and effects. This hybrid technique allows the animators to create more dynamic camera movements and complex visual gags than would be possible with purely traditional methods. The show's famous chicken fights, elaborate musical numbers, and surreal cutaway sequences all rely on this sophisticated blend of old and new animation technologies. The writing room for Family Guy operates differently from most television shows because of the unique challenges created by the cutaway structure. The writers have to create 2 different types of content for every episode: the main storyline that follows traditional narrative rules, and the cutaway material that can be completely disconnected from reality. This dual writing process means that Family Guy episodes are actually much more complex to construct than they appear on screen. The writers have to ensure that the cutaways don't disrupt the pacing of the main story, while also making sure that each mini-scene within the cutaways has its own complete comedic arc. It's like writing a regular television episode while simultaneously writing dozens of very short comedy sketches. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture more than almost any other television show, with countless jokes, phrases, and visual gags becoming viral content across social media platforms. The Surfin' Bird episode alone generated thousands of remixes, parodies, and tribute videos from fans around the world. This cultural influence wasn't accidental but resulted from MacFarlane's deliberate decision to make the show's humor as quotable and shareable as possible. The cutaway structure naturally creates bite-sized pieces of content that work perfectly for online sharing, essentially making every episode a collection of potential viral moments. The business side of Family Guy reveals how successful the show has become beyond just television ratings. The merchandise empire includes everything from action figures to video games, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue annually. The show's characters have appeared in commercials, theme park attractions, and even academic studies about animation and comedy. What makes this commercial success particularly interesting is that it happened despite the show being canceled once and facing constant criticism from various groups. Family Guy proved that controversial content could be incredibly profitable if it connected with audiences authentically, creating a template that many other shows have tried to follow. The voice cast beyond Seth MacFarlane includes some fascinating stories about how actors were recruited and how their characters evolved. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, was actually hired before the show was even greenlit by Fox. MacFarlane was so impressed by her audition that he wrote additional material specifically for her character, expanding Lois's role far beyond what was originally planned. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was just 14 years old when she started working on the show. Her voice literally changed during the early seasons as she went through adolescence while recording the character. The producers had to make subtle adjustments to accommodate her changing vocal range, creating a unique situation where a cartoon character's voice evolved naturally over time. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars differs significantly from other animated series. While The Simpsons typically has celebrities play versions of themselves, Family Guy often has famous actors voice completely original characters or play historical figures in cutaway gags. This approach allows the show to utilize celebrity talent in more creative and unexpected ways. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments feature celebrities doing things they would never do on other shows. Precisely because the animated format and the show's irreverent tone give everyone involved permission to be more experimental. The result is guest performances that often become more famous than the celebrities' live-action work. The international versions of Family Guy reveal how the show's humor translates across different cultures and languages. The cutaway gags often require complete restructuring for international audiences because the references are too specifically American to make sense in other countries. Foreign language versions sometimes feature entirely different jokes that serve the same comedic function but use locally relevant references. This localization process has created dozens of different versions of Family Guy that share the same characters and basic structure, but feature significantly different content. In some ways, these international versions are like alternate universe versions of the show, exploring how the same comedic sensibilities might express themselves in different cultural contexts. The technological evolution of Family Guy's production reflects broader changes in the animation industry. Early episodes were produced using techniques that were already becoming obsolete, while recent seasons utilize cutting-edge digital tools that would have been impossible when the show first aired. Despite these technical advances, the show has maintained its distinctive visual style by deliberately limiting how much the animation quality improves. This conscious decision to maintain visual consistency has allowed Family Guy to feel timeless in ways that many other long-running animated series don't achieve. Episodes from different decades can be watched together without jarring visual discontinuities, creating a cohesive viewing experience across more than 20 years of production. The legacy of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into academic and cultural analysis. Universities offer courses that study the show as an example of postmodern comedy, examining how its cutaway structure reflects contemporary media consumption patterns and attention spans. The show has essentially become a case study in how traditional narrative techniques can be deconstructed while still maintaining audience engagement. As Family Guy continues into its third decade of production, its influence on comedy, animation, and popular culture remains undeniable. From Seth MacFarlane's near-death experience that changed everything, to the unprecedented cancellation and revival that rewrote television business models, the show represents one of the most fascinating success stories in entertainment history. The next time you watch Peter Griffin stumble through another ridiculous adventure or listen to Stewie's sophisticated observations, remember that you're experiencing the result of countless creative decisions, business battles, and pure accidents that somehow combine to create something truly unique in television history. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some bedtime content about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the Griffin household with some fascinating facts that'll either help you drift off peacefully or keep you up thinking about just how wild this show really gets. Now, before we jump into our relaxing journey through Quahog, let me ask you something. Have you ever really stopped to think about how Family Guy has been part of our lives for over 2 decades? Since 1999, this show has given us countless laughs, memorable cutaway gags, and characters that have become household names. But tonight, we're going beyond the surface-level humor to explore some truly mind-blowing details you probably never knew. Here's something that might surprise you right off the bat. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives thought the show wasn't finding its audience. But here's where it gets interesting. Adult Swim picked up the reruns, and the show exploded in popularity. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. They brought it back in 2005, and it's been running ever since. Sometimes, the best things in life really do come back when you least expect them. Let's talk about the voice behind Stewie Griffin for a moment. Seth MacFarlane, the show's creator, originally based Stewie's voice on a combination of Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady and a generic posh English accent. But here's the fascinating part. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's sexuality has always been deliberately ambiguous. The character exists in this interesting space where his romantic interests shift depending on what serves the story best. It's actually a clever writing technique that keeps the character unpredictable and allows for more diverse storylines. Speaking of voices, did you know that Seth MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt? That's 6 major characters, all coming from one incredibly talented vocal performer. When you think about it, MacFarlane is essentially having conversations with himself in most scenes. The man has to switch between these distinct personalities, sometimes within the same sentence. It's like being a one-person theater troupe. Here's a production fact that'll blow your mind. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial concept to final product. The animation process alone requires hundreds of individual artists working on different aspects. Every single movement, facial expression, and background detail has to be hand-drawn and then digitally colored. When you consider that the show produces over 20 episodes per season, you start to realize the incredible amount of work that goes into bringing the Griffin family to life. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't actually planned from the beginning. They evolved naturally as the writers found themselves wanting to include jokes that didn't fit into the main storyline. These random flashbacks and fantasy sequences became such a signature element that other animated shows have tried to copy the format, but none have quite captured the same spontaneous energy that Family Guy brings to these moments. Now, let's explore some character development that might help you see the show in a new light. Brian Griffin, the family dog, was originally going to be much more of a background character. MacFarlane has said that Brian evolved into the show's voice of reason almost by accident. The writers kept finding themselves using Brian as a way to comment on Peter's more outrageous behavior, and gradually he became this intellectual counterpoint to the family's chaos. It's interesting how a character can grow beyond their original intended purpose. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's worth pondering as you drift off tonight. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and broadcasts in over 100 countries worldwide. But the cultural references and American humor don't always translate perfectly. International versions sometimes have to completely rewrite jokes or replace cultural references with local equivalents. Imagine trying to explain a 1,980 seconds American pop culture reference to someone in rural Japan. The localization teams for this show deserve serious recognition. The relationship dynamics within the Griffin family actually reflect a lot of real family psychology, despite all the absurd situations they find themselves in. Take the sibling rivalry between Chris and Meg, for example. While it's exaggerated for comedic effect, it captures something genuine about how teenagers navigate their place within family hierarchies. Even the marriage between Lois and Peter, with all its dysfunction, touches on real issues that many couples face, just amplified to ridiculous proportions. One aspect of the show that's evolved significantly over the years is its approach to social commentary. Early seasons focused more on pure absurdist humor, but as the series progressed, it began tackling more complex social and political issues. The writers found ways to embed serious conversations about topics like religion, politics, and social justice within the framework of outrageous comedy. It's like sneaking vegetables into a kid's favorite dessert. The animation style of Family Guy has also undergone subtle but significant changes over the decades. If you compare early episodes to recent ones, you'll notice the color palette has become richer, the character movements more fluid, and the background details more elaborate. Technology has allowed the animators to add layers of visual storytelling that weren't possible in the better show's early days. Yet they've managed to maintain the core visual identity that makes Family Guy instantly recognizable. Let's talk about the show's relationship with music for a moment. Family Guy has featured hundreds of musical numbers over the years, from elaborate production numbers to simple character songs. Seth MacFarlane's background in musical theater heavily influences these sequences. Many of the songs are surprisingly well crafted from a musical standpoint, with proper verse-chorus structures and sophisticated orchestrations. Some episodes are essentially animated musicals disguised as sitcom episodes. Here's a fascinating detail about the show's writing process. The writer's room operates on a principle they call yes and, borrowed from improvisational comedy. When someone pitches an idea, no matter how outrageous, the group tries to build on it rather than shut it down immediately. This approach has led to some of the show's most memorable and bizarre moments. It's a reminder that creativity often flourishes when we suspend our initial judgment and let ideas develop naturally. The character of Meg Griffin represents something unique in television comedy. She's simultaneously the most normal member of her family and the one who receives the most abuse from everyone around her. This creates an interesting dynamic where the audience often sympathizes with her while still laughing at her misfortunes. It's a delicate balance that the writers have maintained for over 20 years, and it speaks to something deeper about how we treat people who don't fit into expected social roles. Cleveland Brown's departure to his own spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy created some interesting continuity challenges for the writers. They had to explain his absence and return in ways that felt natural to the ongoing story, while also acknowledging the real-world production reasons behind these changes. It's a perfect example of how television shows must constantly adapt to behind-the-scenes realities while maintaining narrative consistency. The show's approach to time and continuity is intentionally flexible. Characters age slowly or not at all, major events from one episode might never be mentioned again, and the family's financial situation fluctuates wildly depending on story needs. This loose approach to continuity allows for maximum creative freedom, but also creates opportunities for dedicated fans to spot inconsistencies and create theories about the show's internal logic. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Countless memes, viral videos, and social media trends have originated from or been inspired by the show. The phrase, "Oh no, he didn't," might never have become a cultural touchstone without Peter Griffin's dramatic delivery. The show's rapid-fire humor style has influenced how people create and consume comedy content online. The voice acting in Family Guy extends far beyond the main cast. Over the years, the show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest voices, from major Hollywood stars to political figures to fellow comedians. Some guests play themselves, others take on original characters, and a few have become recurring voices in the Family Guy universe. The casting directors have an impressive ability to match celebrity voices with characters that enhance rather than distract from the story. Here's something that might help you appreciate the show's craft as you wind down for the night. The timing of Family Guy's comedy is incredibly precise. Voice actors don't just deliver lines. They perform them with specific rhythms and pauses that maximize comedic impact. The editors then fine-tune these performances, sometimes adjusting timing by fractions of seconds to hit the perfect comedic beat. It's a level of precision that most viewers never consciously notice but definitely feel. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved significantly since its early days. Standards and practices for television have changed, allowing Family Guy to push boundaries that would have been impossible in its first seasons. At the same time, the writers have developed more sophisticated ways to be provocative without simply relying on shock value. It's an interesting case study in how creative people adapt to changing cultural standards while maintaining their artistic voice. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, consider how the show has managed to remain relevant across multiple generations of viewers. People who watched the show as teenagers in the early 2000s are now watching it with their own children. The humor that resonates with different age groups varies, but there's something universal about the Griffin family's chaotic energy that transcends generational boundaries. The production team behind Family Guy has created what amounts to a small animation empire. The success of the main show led to spin-offs, specials, video games, merchandise, and even live concert tours featuring the show's music. From a business perspective, Family Guy demonstrates how a creative property can expand far beyond its original medium while maintaining its core identity. Finally, as you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something special in the landscape of American entertainment. It's a show that dares to be completely ridiculous while occasionally touching on profound truths about family, society, and human nature. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who just discovered the show, there's something comforting about knowing that somewhere in the fictional town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some new absurd adventure. The next time you watch Family Guy, you might find yourself noticing details you never saw before, appreciating the craft behind the chaos, or simply enjoying the comfort of familiar characters doing wonderfully unpredictable things. Sometimes the best. Entertainment doesn't try to change your life. It just makes the everyday world a little more interesting and a lot more fun. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow's another day in Quahog, and there's always another ridiculous adventure waiting just around the corner. Whether you're Team Peter, Team Brian, or even Team Meg, the Griffin family will be there whenever you need a laugh or just want to escape into a world where anything can happen, and usually does.